for me, I'm a hobbyist musician, and sometimes I look at someone who manages to make a living of it. Like I play with a folk group, and within that group there are, two people who music is full time for them, and a couple other people like me who have other full time gigs, and we do music for fun. And it's hard to not be envious sometimes, to think like, music is your whole life. But then at the same time, I also see from the outside looking in, how that could be really hard to take something you love and turn it into work and not lose the love or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think work has a quality to it. Well, it's a big topic. Before I make any pronouncements, let me just say, I'm not sure I know from one day to the next if my thoughts are consistent or whether they change or.
Sure.
I don't know that I could talk about today. I could talk about, I could talk about one of my recent experiences, but you're certainly, I think this came about, we were discussing what it's like to be out in the mountains and how wonderful that is.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, well, but you work on a cell tower, so you have to work. And with music, it's like I think the reason why I thought of it is because it is a spiritual practice, for sure, much as being in the mountains can be.
Yeah.
When you bring work into spiritual practice, I guess if we were really going to talk about this, what's it like being a minister or a priest or something?
Interesting point, yeah.
My wife she just retired from her position as the church accompanist at our local church here where I live in. That came up a lot, because she used to go to church as a attendee and then became the accompanist, and that's a very different job. But it's a very big topic, isn't it? And I don't know even what you want to talk about. So
let me just kick things off by asking Jeremiah. Let's just tell you what. Can you tell me if God exists first of all, and also what's the point of existence?
Well, get the small stuff out of the way first.
Yeah, let's get that out of the way. Then we'll talk accordions. I'm glad you mentioned your wife. Just recently, earlier. Let's see. It was over the weekend. I have a close friend who is he's becoming something of a real estate mogul, really. He's keeps purchasing more and more awesome properties in more and more exciting places. But he recently bought an old church in Vermont.
Really?
That he's turning into kind of an event center,
Wow.
And the look of it just made me think so much of some of the venues that I've seen you and Timothy Cummings play in. Including that Christmas concert that you did. The pandemic makes it crazy. Was it last year or the year before?
It was the year before, right? There was a video that we did.
It was a video feed of the whole thing. It was yourself, your wife, Tim, and a soprano singer.
Yeah, and just us. There was no congregation.
That's right. It was just the music from yeah.
That was done professionally. By a friend of Anamika's who does it for a living. So hopefully it was good quality because
it sure
it's
was.
hard. Yeah, that's her church. Yep. So you saw it.
That's the church, huh? That organ in there looked so cool. Do you know how old that organ is?
That organ is not old. It's a very small organ, as you might have noticed.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to say that I don't know enough about it to speak.
Does the smallness of the what are those? What do they call them? Manuals? The manuals? Is that what they call
manuals?
The
Yeah.
Does the smallness of the manuals relate to the smallness of pipes hidden in the walls, or does it?
No, I don't think so. It has to do. Well, I don't know why it's such a short keyboard. Yeah.
Sorry to jump all over the place, Jeremiah,
but
you mentioned that you come to Moab sometimes. Do you happen to have ever got up to Salt Lake yourself when you've come out here to Utah?
Yes, in fact, many, many years ago, I played a house concert in Salt Lake.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was after actually, there's an event that I played at up in Colorado, run by some friends of mine. It's a dance event, and then on Sunday afternoon, we were flying out of Salt Lake, and they had us do a house concert on Sunday. But I have spent, because of Moab, so I work with the Moab Community Dance Band every year. I go out.
Do you? You get out there every year, huh?
Yeah, almost. It's been about, 7 or 8 years now I've been doing it. And I'll just tell you the long story because it seems like we're just going to ramble, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're going to take the long, every path, every fork in the road, we're going to take the long way, okay?
Yes, that's the way we're going to do this. That's right.
Well, I first came out to Moab for the Moab Music Festival, which I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have heard of it, yeah. I've never attended.
It's quite the to-do, and I was, it was 20 years ago maybe, and a fellow by the name of Paul Woodiel and Chris Lair had invited me to play with them. They are the you could say the folkloric or traditional Celtic music component of an otherwise strictly classical festival. But it was very eye-opening. We played outside in all these incredible venues, and Chris and I both kind of fell in love with the place, and Chris was a little more able to just pick up and move, and so he came out to Moab and started a contra dance band.
Oh, like he moved himself there on a...
Well, he did stay. He spent a lot of time out there. I shouldn't say he lived there.
So it wasn't necessarily his home necessarily, but he was there a lot.
Not really, but he spent a lot of time there, and he got it going. He got the energy to really get it off the ground. And then Miriam Graham is the woman I work with who was there then, and she's sort of taken it on as her own mission. So she raises funds to fly to bring me out and pay me, and that's great. Obviously, it's not terribly expensive for them. You know, they're a larger, they're say 15 people or maybe 12 people altogether, I guess. They don't all show up at once, but I get to work with them. They're lovely people, and I get to enjoy being in Moab. So
yeah. I've got to assume you've maybe taken a peek at Arches National Park.
Yeah, I mean that the first time I came, Miriam was a ranger at Arches.
Oh, really? Gotcha.
So she showed me all the back,
Yeah, you got the exclusive tour. Yeah.
But and this is so sad. It has really changed.
Yeah.
Really changed.
Yeah, I feel like Arches was sort of like there's a lot of public land out here in the western U.S., of course, but Arches was kind of our family favorite when I was a kid. We'd go down to Arches quite a lot, and I think maybe my wife and I took our kids when our oldest were very little once, but we haven't gone back, and it's not because we don't love the park. It just it's not the same.
Yeah, I find it. It's changed so much that So there's other places, obviously, to go.
Yeah, there are. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I always loved standing there in the red rock of Arches and looking to the south, especially around this time of year, around the fall and winter. And the La Salle mountain range was right there so it's like you'd have the red rock and then the blue mountains and then the white tips on the mountains.
It's so amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
This is a series. Why not take the winding road? And now I'm trying to think like, what's a really classy segue to get from national parks in southern Utah into accordions? Yeah, there's got to be a way.
I don't know if there is. Well, let me say what I understood your very first when you reached out to me, and I was trying to think, when was that? When did we first?
Yeah, it blends for me a bit because I know. See, I've been listening to your music. For at least since 2016 or so.
Okay, was that with Tim, the Wind Among the Reeds?
That's when I first came across your music. Now this morning I've been listening to nothing but the Clayfoot Strutters. So I've progressed since then. Well, maybe I shouldn't say progressed, but
I think you've devolved.
Devolved. There you go. My sampling of the music of Jeremiah, we might say, has spread out a bit since then. But still, The Wind Among the Reeds is one of my favorite of all bagpipey albums for sure.
And funny thing about the Strutters, James, that there was a bagpiper in the Clayfoot Strutters. His name was Chris Lair, the same fellow I was.
Oh, no way! Oh, there you go. There's our
full circle.
Yeah, perfect.
I mean, Chris plays the Highland bagpipes.
Yeah.
And,
So he might have
not
been.
small pipes.
I know there's a whistler that I hear quite a bit in the Clayfoot Strutters. Well, quite a bit on
that's
several
him.
tracks. Is that him?
Yep.
I
Yeah,
guess.
and
That's what
he's
makes
quite a
sense.
virtuoso. Actually, I mean, I have to say he played the bassoon in the Indiana orchestra. I'm trying to think, where did he play? In Indianapolis Orchestra. He was an amazing Highland and small pipe player, and then he picked up the Ilian pipes, and he was just killer on that. I mean, he's a genius.
That's
However,
awesome.
However, talking about geniuses, let's talk about Timothy Cummings because I have grown. Tim and I are friends very much first and foremost. I should just point that out that he and I. Gosh, we met. Pete Sutherland introduced us. That's the fiddler. That's in the Strutters. I'm just trying to think. We did some projects together. We had a program called the Armageddon Quartet.
Oh, that's a good. Okay, hang on a sec. Did it include a banjo as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Pete played the banjo. Tim on the bagpipes and the accordion, and then we had we wanted to have a bombard, but we couldn't.
Yeah.
So instead we got a viola. We thought, well,
Is that close enough?
and Tim and I did a couple of things as a duo, and it just immediately clicked.
Yeah.
It really his ear, his musicality, and I think above all his personality really made it. Such a good fit for both of us. So I'm just trying to think, giving you a little bit of the background. He introduced me to my wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the story was that my wife is from the Netherlands. She married a fellow that was from Burlington and moved over here quite a while ago, and then they got separated, and she was living in Burlington, going to the same church that Tim was. Mm-hmm. And I think they sang together in the church, and Tim knew her music, and then he took her to a concert that I did in the area with a group called Nightingale. Did you get around to listening to Nightingale?
I have listened to some Nightingale, yeah.
Well, so anyway, and I think we just, so we hit it off, and he became the godfather to our son Luke.
Oh, wow.
So I would say Tim is, and Tim, his partner Mary Leslie, I've worked with. She's a contradance caller, among other things. So.
Well, the connections run deeper than I had even imagined. There you go.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's way up in Burlington. It's an hour and a half from here. But of course, for you, that's not. But I know an hour and a half. It's not
I'll tell you what.
far.
I went to Del Tech for some training for work a little while ago on some safety stuff, and was really disoriented for a while about just how quickly we crossed state lines and stuff like that. Like traveling, just like going to dinner and going to different places and stuff on the weekends and stuff like that. Just like very disorienting to me to be like, wait, I landed in one state but I'm going to a place in another state. It was.
I'm going to dinner in a different state.
Yeah. I was like, well, very, very confusing for me, where I'm used to traveling between like Utah, Nevada, and California.
Oh my gosh. Are you from California originally, James?
No, I grew up here in Utah. Yeah.
You did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, my mom's from Washington. My dad's from South Dakota. They met at a university in Utah and stayed there. So
Utah's an amazing place. I have to say, I fear it in some level. You know about the guy from Utah that tried to buy a ton of acreage up here where I live.
Yes,
and build a city.
The city of Joseph, he called it, right?
Oh my gosh! Did you know that's literally where I live?
No, really. I've always wanted to, like, I want to go there just to be like, what was he thinking? What's and is that still going on, or did he?
No.
Okay.
The old Vermont resistance. There was a lot of community activism. I mean, people saw it as a threat, and to be honest with you, I think that's the only way you can see it.
It also, I can't help thinking to myself that it's like a return of a threat of a century and a half previous as well, to other places. This sort of like this idea of like, I'm just gonna take over, this is all I've got.
What you have there. I mean, he obviously he did couch it in terms of renewable energies and affordable housing, and God knows we need affordable housing. But anyway, that's so ironic that town that he chose is, the town we live in, the town next to us. It was just, it's a remote area, but not that remote.
Yeah.
There's a lot of activism here.
Yeah.
People, So anyway, that fell by the way. He's probably doing it somewhere else.
Oh yeah, I believe he did. I haven't followed his project closely, but I do remember. It's certainly a curiosity. It's the kind of thing you hear about and you go, "Wow, wait a minute." How often do you have this somewhat independently wealthy individual trying to do something on that scale? It's kind of an almost it has I don't know, kind of an Elon Musk flavor to it, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and I think it would have been just out of keeping with what Vermont is, I guess. I mean,
Hey friends, this is just me from the future in the editing room, as it were. I figured that since we were getting so darn rambly here at the front end of the show, I'd just go ahead and interrupt the flow of the conversation here rather than later. I do apologize if this is just painfully boring for anybody listening. Feel free to, hit that skip ahead 30 seconds button if you want to. It gets a little more focused on the bagpipe and accordion music as the show goes on. But it's probably obvious I was just having a great time talking to Jeremiah. He's a cool cat and lots of fun to talk to, and he makes some really great music. This album, again, is The Wind Among the Reeds. Jeremiah and Timothy Cummings have done a few projects together that blend accordion and bagpipes, and they're all excellent. I'll have links to their sort of portfolio of work down below, as well as some of Jeremiah's other work, which is also excellent. Don't forget, you can support the show via Patreon, or you can just send me gold bullion or cash or money order, anything. I'll take currency or precious metals or bagpipes. You got some bagpipes laying around and you want to send them to me, I'll take them. What else? You can email the show, TheDroningOnPodcast@gmail.com. Links to the social media and all that kind of stuff. It's all down below. Oh, but we are doing of course, we'll do a drawing this month, and that'll be the giveaway this month is this album that we're talking about, The Wind Among the Reeds. It felt like we went kind of too much of a stretch without hearing a track here as well. So in the background here, you're hearing the opening track from the album. Super cool one. It's got a title that I can't pronounce, so I'm just going to stick it in here. And check out the album to find out what the title is. So I'll play this track out, and then we'll just fade back into the conversation. Thank you again. Have a great day, and see you the next episode. Bye-bye.
We are rambling in the extreme, but I'm gonna try to do my part to bring us back to the discussion.
Why don't you take the lead,
hand.
huh? Forget me. I'm obviously failing at my host duties. Will you
You're fine. In a way, actually, a good interview just goes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing.
We'll just trust that this is going somewhere good, right?
But I had never really. I did think about this morning.
Yeah.
James, when I got up, I started thinking about the bagpipes in particular because I knew we were going to be talking, and that's your audience, right? So we should address the issue of the uniqueness, the downright extraordinarily unusual set of circumstances that bring the pipes to people's consciousness. Many people who do not play the bagpipes, and I think we can count none of your listeners, but all of the rest of the world.
Right, yeah.
People just don't understand the instrument at all. At all. It's
wrapped in a
mystique. You look at somebody play, you don't even know where the sound is coming from or how they're producing it. it's a gorgeous sound that I think first and foremost, the sound. I mean, especially the small pipes. I'm a big fan of the small pipes. The sound is so enticing. It is. A wooden reed has a sound like a human voice, and it's really exceptionally beautiful. And I think that is never lost on me. Like, I always, when I listen to the pipes, I just feel like, you listen to a piper warming up their instrument, and it sounds like the most beautiful thing you've ever heard. It's like it doesn't really require, and again, the things that it lacks to paint the picture. Of course, everybody, again, your listeners know this, but the thing that people don't understand, that I didn't understand, is what is not present in the bagpipes. What is not possible, and that's a lot. There are many musical elements, dynamics and range, just tonal variation. It's very limited that way. And the funny thing is that when Tim and I started working together and started really thinking about what we were doing, and then we decided to record, and then we were going to write about what we were doing, I sort of realized it's this weird combination. I mean, accordion and bagpipes have been a pairing since the 1800s, practically.
Okay, tell me anything you've got about this.
Well,
I'm curious about this,
Well, every culture has a version of the bagpipes. Let's start there. I don't believe there's a culture that doesn't have bagpipes. It's so ubiquitous. But
I think this is something that many of us pipers run into, is that if we get any kind of question about our instrument, it's, are you playing Scottish or Irish? And it's like, okay, well,
there's a little more than that.
There are other options,
Right, exactly. I mean, I think if we limit this to a discussion of the Western world, that does help things. Yeah. And so in the West, I think accordions were common in the late 1800s, turn of the century for sure. Like 1900 was an explosion of accordion.
And do you include, when you say accordion in this case, is this kind of a familial term, like concertinas?
Yes, I'm talking about the family, the bellows family, because the instrument evolved a lot rather quickly. But by the late 1800s, I do know that they were all button accordions at the time. So they weren't piano accordions, but essentially they did exactly the same thing. And why that instrument caught on so fast, I don't know, because it's relatively new. I think it was the solution to so many other problems that instruments had of tuning. Like the accordion just was like, it's the gold standard. You don't tune it.
Right.
Now that's not to say that it didn't go out of tune, because they do. But these things were manufactured, and I think Industrial Revolution, that was Germany, Italy. They were starting to pump these things out, and the Italians
pump them
out.
And it really is.
It's mostly the Italians. I think they brought it with them when they emigrated to Paris, to other cities.
When I think of like a modern accordion, modern, also like what they would have been bringing from Italy and Germany, etc., are they all going to have metal reeds, or were wooden reeds ever a thing?
No, there were no wooden reeds. Okay. To my knowledge, and by the way, I am not the person who is going to declare anything definitive about these subjects. I'm not a historian, nor am I particularly well-versed in the history of the accordion.
Well, I know that... Hey, if we're going to open by declaring things about the existence of God, the nature of life and reality, that kind of stuff, then you can go ahead and declare stuff about accordions at this point. Let's not start getting careful now.
I can make pronouncements. Well, I'm more worried that somebody will say, I'll get all these phone calls.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I don't think, I don't know of any wooden reeded accordion. I just don't know of it. I don't, Well, the problem is, I think you need to have access, right? If you have a wooden reed,
that's
you're
true.
going to need access to the reed.
Yeah.
The idea of metal, and I think this is Charles Wheatstone, right? This is in England. He came up with this instrument called the concertina, and the whole point was that it was metal reeds which would not change so much. Yeah. But the accordion introduced something much more diabolic, than the concertina had envisioned, because it included these buttons that were basically triads.
Yeah, that's right.
And the triad button, I mean, I think of it, from the point of view of a bagpipes, not only are you playing with an instrument that's well tempered, so that I can't play microtones, but to add insult to injury, then on my left hand, when I am accompanying any melody that we're playing, everything's in thirds, and there's no room for a bagpiper to be who they are, in a way. In a weird way, somebody has to explain this to me. Why did the bagpipers of the past put up with this instrument when it took away almost everything that they were creating? This ambiguous sound, where you can really revel in things not being well tempered.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing quality, and the accordion just comes in and just changes all of that.
Do you feel like is the contrast something like the accordion has some all lines are very clearly defined? It's kind of like it's this or it's that, but there's not a slide in between. Whereas bagpipes are it's kind of ethereal. We're kind of approximately here, and I'm going to slide over here, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's very. I mean, just the notion of the keyboard. The keyboard, you go from one note ends, and another note begins. There's no in between.
Yeah.
You can try. Lord knows, piano players. I grew up as a piano player first and foremost, and one of the things I learned to do as a very young person is imitate blues singers on the piano. Now, I could walk over to the piano and plunk it out for you, but I don't know that you would hear me.
Give it a try. Let's see if it comes through.
I'll try it. But, the whole idea of blues was that you had notes in between the cracks.
Yeah.
So, can you hear that okay?
Yes, that comes through clear.
So that idea, instead of doing individual notes, you'd have...
Sure, yeah.
I mean, that's a imitation of a vocal blue note that is two notes on the piano played together. So anyway, I did want to get back to the accordion. The thing about the accordion that I think that it offered, and again, if I can take up one example, which is really telling, and you may know this story. I don't know if you know about French valse musette, the kind of music that was heard in Paris at the beginning of the 1900s.
No, I really don't. I suspect I've probably heard samples of it, but I wouldn't recognize it for its name. No.
I think it illustrates a little bit about this relationship that and again, because it comes. Tim and I playing together, you asking me to do this interview, I did think about this one story which I want to tell you, which really gets at the heart of the bagpipe and the accordion. The people from Auvergne in France, which is the central part of France, emigrated to Paris in the late 1800s, like everybody else, And they brought their customs with them, their food and their instruments, and that included an instrument called the cabret, which is a French bagpipe. And they played their music, and they had these little parties in Paris, and they were known for selling coal, because there was a lot of coal in Auvergne, and so they would truck it up to Paris, and they sold it for fuel. And they had these little coal stores, and they also sold, newspapers and tobacco. And these tiny little establishments would close at the end of the workday, and then in the evening they would have dances. And the dance of that area was played on the bagpipe, on the cabret. All through the late 1800s, this was a thing. At the same time, these Italian families were emigrating to Paris, and they brought the accordion, the button accordion. Yeah. And at the time, that instrument is similar to the one that I play in that it was a fully chromatic instrument, but instead of a keyboard, they had buttons on the right-hand side. But it basically, and I don't know if you're familiar with the layout of the accordion, but it can accompany on the left hand with all kinds of bass notes and triads, major, minor, dominant, diminished. Has a full chromatic palette. And the accordion players started, meeting up and jamming with some of the bagpipers and other musicians. There was lots of yeah. Well, there were banjo players too, actually. And I wish I could read. I just want to see if I can find this great quote because it says a lot about the relationship between the two.
Yeah. Well, while you look, I just wanted to let you know. Like, definitely, please do be speaking to me as if I know nothing about the accordion, because that's part of my interest here is that I have often been really surprised by how many bagpipers at professional levels and hobby levels, their second instrument or third, or like one of their secondary instruments that they dabble with is the accordion. There's like something.
Really?
It's not. I have no. What's the opposite of like just stories you tell? I have no empirical data on this.
Yes.
Just little hints here and there that like, oh, you know, Stuart Little plays the accordion as well. Like, oh, and my friend here who plays bagpipes just picked up an accordion. Like, there seems to be some strong interest. And so there's a strong chance that a lot of people listening who are pipers either have dabbled in accordion or want to dabble in accordion. Because
if they know about the accordion, then what I'm about to say, yes, it might be redundant, but I will start from the beginning is... The very, very beginning would go back to China. There was an instrument in China that is believed to be really the precursor of all accordions. It was called the sheng, and it looks and sounds a bit like an organ. It has tubes that you blow into, but there are reeds, and I actually think this is a very old instrument. Those were wooden reeds.
Oh, okay. So there's our.
So there's maybe the source of the sheng used wooden reeds, I believe. But they were in tubes, and they used you blew over. I'm pretty sure.
Oh wait, is this that instrument that was used in the Mandalorian soundtrack? Like sticks of bamboo with little reeds over holes. I shouldn't. I'm being way too vague about this. I'm sorry. I shouldn't even brought that up.
I'm not sure, but at any rate, the accordion really didn't get in. Charles, I think the first time of metal reed usage was the concertina in England by this guy Charles Wheatstone, and that quickly. And I do have a timeline, which I could even read to you. But, since we're chatting, I don't want to get too... I want to be vague enough to just say that the Italians were the ones that are so closely associated with the production of the instrument. The Italians and the Germans. And the story that I'm going to tell you takes place in Paris around 1906. Now, so imagine here you are in Paris. You're from the Auvergne. You play the bagpipe, and you go to these balls and you play, and there are banjo players there because guitar was not a thing early 1900s. I don't know if you knew that, but the guitar was not an instrument that Europeans played, but they did have the tenor banjo. Now the interesting thing was they were heavily influenced by music in the United States at the same time. As they were doing this stuff, we were having vaudeville.
Oh, okay, sure.
And so it's interesting that in early 1900s, there was so much a transatlantic communication and influence that musicians in Paris knew about jazz. They knew about the beginnings of music in the United States. They listened to tango from Argentina. They knew about... these were sophisticated people. This is Paris. So they knew a lot of stuff.
That is very interesting because I so often think of the transatlantic transfer of culture being purely Western in direction rather than a back and forth,
Oh, no, oh my gosh, Europe was so influenced by early jazz. And, 1906, I don't know what was happening in the United States in terms of actual jazz. It was certainly, ragtime was big. I mean, there were the rumblings of a new type of expression. And all through the early 1900s, this connection between France and the United States was very strong. I just want to say, but back to this story. So there was a guy called Bouscatel, and he was a famous bagpiper, super famous. and he had a bar in Paris. And this guy called Charles, I think it was, Paguri, I thought it was. At any rate, he wanted to, he asked to sit in, and there was a bagpipe and I guess a hurdy-gurdy, which is another French instrument, medieval French instrument, and they played together with this guy Paguri. And what was amazing was the accordion was both loud, in tune, and could accompany itself, and with not just with drones, like the bagpipe has drones, okay?
Right.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You can accompany yourself on a bagpipe, but the accordion was like doing like jazz progressions and doing syncopations and doing things that. And the guy, this guy says, and this is the quote I want to read to you: "The days of my bagpipes." This is Bouscatel talking, the bagpiper.
Yeah.
"The days of my bagpipes are numbered, and your hurdy-gurdy too. This fellow with his accordion carries with him our ruin. It is a revolution on the way. It's a complete orchestra, this instrument of the devil." So basically,
that's great.
At the time, there was, and understandably so, the mayor of Paris got involved because by 1910, there was this huge a number of accordion players taking gigs.
Bagpipers and hurdy-gurdyists are rising up and saying these accordionists are taking our work.
This is serious. The mayor of Paris issued a proclamation, and he said, "Bal musette," which is what they called it, musette. That's another name for the bagpipe. Only are the only instrument allowed, and he lists the instruments: bagpipe, banjo, hurdy-gurdy, but he says there will be no accordion.
The accordion was the officially persecuted by the state to get him out of there.
By the mayor of Paris. I mean, it's funny because they had to do that because that it was making inroads.
Yeah.
And they didn't want that. And it was foreign and et cetera, et cetera.
Sure,
well,
of course.
Okay, so the end of this is a happy ending to the story. That Bouscatel had a daughter, Paguri had a son, wouldn't you know, they fall in love. Get married.
It's like the kingdoms forming an alliance.
It's very much like that. It's kind of classic, story. Actually.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that I hadn't heard that story before. That's delightful.
It is a great story, yeah. And I think the son. So she was the daughter of Bouscatel, who's probably the very, very famous. I don't think she actually played the bagpipes.
That was going to be my next question: is if they each played the instrument, or if it was more just a mixing of the families.
I think it was the families.
Yeah.
And then the son of Paguri was a maker. Again, it had to do with the manufacturing of the instruments. But what it did, it really did cement the relationship between the bagpipes and the accordions, so that through the teens, the 20s, the 30s, right up until the war, French valse musette, was what we call it today, is known for the sound of the accordion. The accordion when you hear it, immediately it brings you to an era and a place. You hear accordion, you most often hear it in some kind of silly ad for something. It's very evocative. It's jazzy sounding. It's chromatic sounding. You see the Paris rooftops. You see a cafe.
Yes.
And you see somebody playing the accordion. Now, what's interesting is that this is all they literally whitewashed the bagpipe right out of the picture, because nobody in their right mind would hear the sound of this music today and think, oh, well, once upon a time it was only the bagpipe. Right.
No, not at all. It makes me think of, there's an accordionist that I don't know if you know of him. I don't know. See, I'm a member of the bagpipe family, and I don't know much about the accordion family over there on the other side, right? But there's this guy named Dan Newton.
I do know Dan. I know him quite well.
So he does, he just has a couple albums that are just straight up called Cafe Accordion, and some learning books based off those as well that I have here on my shelf. So that's kind of why I've followed him, and I feel like the music that you're describing immediately, it's some of his tunes that come to mind, like very evocative of like this commercial scene of a Parisian cafe.
Yeah, and it's a marketing thing. I mean, I'll have to say it's very it's. I mean, I get it. I get that we like to have things simplified for us.
And part of human nature, for sure.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Categorized and simplified, yeah.
Within that history that we've been talking about, there's so many mini dramas and stories. There's a lot more detail in it. The bagpipe didn't just disappear, obviously, because it's still being played. I play with friends. There are tons of bagpipers in France today.
Yeah.
Who play the cabaret. And the accordionists, we have register switches and they have names, and one of the register switch names is musette. But that's
really?
A word for a word for bagpipe. Yeah.
Interesting.
And now, so I'm going to just read you this timeline because I talked about this earlier, and I didn't want to say yes, I'll give you a timeline. But if we want to go historically,
yeah. And we do.
The Sheng, which is spelled S-H-E-N-G, the Sheng is dated about 3000 B.C. in China.
Good heavens.
Yeah, so it's really an old technology, and again, those reeds would have, well, by necessity, they were metal. They were wood. They were not metal. They probably were cane reeds. Mm-hmm. I don't know too much about it, but then we jump forward to the 12th century in England. There was a reed organ, and I'm really interested to know more about that, whether that had wooden reeds or not, because I don't know. So that's 12th century. And then, again, that was an organ, so played with a keyboard, like organs were. The difference is, instead of the pipes that we associate and the columns of air with organs today, these organs were reed organs. Mm-hmm. But I guess it just didn't take... I mean, obviously, the addition of the bellows was a whole other thing. Now, in 1820, in Europe, somewhere, I'm not even sure, the harmonica was developed.
Sure, yeah.
So that was an early reed instrument that was mouth-blown. The English concertina, 1829, that was the first introduction of bellows with a reed instrument. Mm. And then shortly, at the same time in Germany, they developed this thing called the diatonic accordion. Are you familiar with the two terms diatonic and chromatic as regards to the accordion?
I took a music theory class in high school.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that the past me could have given you a good definition, but I couldn't tell you.
Okay, well, for your listeners, I think this is relevant because it's important. And by the way, the bagpipe, let's be honest, is a diatonic instrument, although it's capable of some chromaticism.
Should we say diatonic-ish?
We could say that. Now, what does that actually mean? I will explain using, again, my piano because it's so handy. Mm-hmm. A diatonic instrument is considered, and again, I apologize for offending any purists. I'm generalizing here, but an instrument that can play in a key. That is what we call a diatonic scale. Mm. It has the 7 notes of the scale and no others.
Yeah.
So the only thing you can do with that, of course, as you know well on a bagpipe, well, you can play in a major key, you can play in a minor key, or you can play in a mixolydian key, or what we would call modal tunes, many Scottish and... Yeah, right. So there's
that's maybe even kind of our default.
It might be actually because, well, yes, the bagpipe, yes, in view of the where the drones are placed, oftentimes that scale is the default scale.
Because doesn't that have? Is it the 7th that's kind of funky?
Well, it's not funky. It's lowered.
It's lowered. Yeah, exactly. That's in bagpipe terms. That's our G, our high G. That's at least what we call it, even though it doesn't necessarily sound that way.
I'll play it in the right key. This is A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G natural.
Yes, that's our home base there.
That's your home base, and that is your diatonic. That's your mixolydian, if you want to get technical. It's called the mixolydian mode. You probably knew that.
I didn't. You just go ahead and treat me as if I don't know anything, because that's probably going to be accurate in most cases.
Modes. I mean, the modes have names. The Greeks gave them names.
Yeah.
We use the Greek names.
And I think that for any pipers who have also dabbled in whistle, that's part of why some tunes just don't quite sound the same. Like if you try playing like Minstrel Boy or something, you get to that seventh, and on the whistle it's going to come out like, in this case, a G sharp instead of a G natural.
Oh, that doesn't work.
It does make us some of our versions hopping from bagpipe chanter to whistle or something like that do sound just a little off, and that's why.
Well, sure, that makes sense. Now, again, so these diatonic accordions do the same thing.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
They play in one key, a major scale. They play in a different key, a minor scale, and yet another key, a mixolydian scale or mode. So they have that going for them. But if you were to sit at a piano, like I am doing, and you were to say, okay, instead of just going, I'm going to play all the black, white, and white notes together. I'm going to play them all. That's a very different scale, right?
Yeah.
Sounds different, and it's called a chromatic scale. It is thanks to the great J.S. Bach. We know it on the piano is a well-tempered. In other words, all of these notes that I'm playing are equidistant from each other.
Well tempered, as in the famous cavalier, the well tempered clavalier. Is that what it is?
Now you've got the well tempered clavier.
Clavier, that's it.
Clavier is a word for the keyboard. Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So the well tempered clavier was Bach's attempt to demonstrate why it was so important that we have a system where all the notes were the same distance, because before his time they weren't.
Have you ever listened to or watched people playing keyboards that have been tuned to different standards that are often
yes,
like
I have. In fact, Tim.
It's like the
Tim
poorly
has
tempered
one.
Clavier. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, there's a great book out which you should definitely read about. I think it says why equal temperament ruined music. It says, now how equal temperament ruined music and why you should care.
Now, in bagpipes, sometimes we talk about equal temperament versus just intonation. Is that kind of coming into play here? I don't honestly understand that perfectly.
Yes, that is. Now, but before so that's a path down the road that is, it's not a small path. In fact, it's more like a trip down the Grand Canyon. I'm not sure we'll ever get
so maybe
back.
We shouldn't turn that direction right now.
If we do that, we're going to get lost down there. So let's go back to the two poles that we've been talking about, chromatic versus diatonic.
Right, yeah.
It's really important from an accordionist's point of view to understand that they are two completely separate instruments. And although you can pretend to play like a diatonic accordion with a chromatic instrument, like a piano accordion, it isn't. It's chromatic. You can play all the white and black notes. And when you're playing with the bagpipe, you have, there are things that you just have to realize, the bagpipe can't do that note. It doesn't have that capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, the single hardest thing for me every time I sit down to write a tune, I'll write one with Tim in mind, let's say, and I wrote one of the, I ended up giving this one tune the title, Yeah, Nah. I think it's an expression that they have in New Zealand, where Tim used to live, which means no way. Because it's very hard. So I wrote it too, and I thought, this will be great on the bagpipes. And Tim took one look at it. He said, yeah, nah. It's hard to write for bagpipes because you have to know not only the range, you have to understand the range, which is, again, quite limited.
Yeah, or lack thereof, right?
Yeah, you have to understand, and the other word that I think is relevant is the ground, where the center of the scale is going to be.
Yeah.
As you say, high G, you have to know you can't, it's just, there's so many things. When I write music, I find myself intuitively going outside that, which, Tim, you can adapt. Of course,
right.
Bagpipers get used to that. But.
Yeah, aside from, of course, we can use tape to kind of adjust our tuning holes, and with small pipes, you've got other tuning schemes. You could get a chanter that's pitched to D or C or A or B flat to kind of get around some of this. Of course, there are things like uilleann pipes and stuff like that too.
There are options.
But for many of us, like, it's actually the limitations that is a big part of what makes it interesting. Because then it's like, well, what can I do with this? And it kind of drives creativity in some ways, though it can also lead to frustration in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And actually, Jeremiah, I opened the episode in post. I'll put in. I was thinking to open with that 5/4 waltzes set that you and Tim did together. That's the first track that like stabbed my heart, in a beautiful, good way, and so it's kind of special to me at this point. It's Port Williams and Apple Knoll, but I wondered where you. There's another track on that Wind Among the Reeds album. I don't know if this is applicable to the conversation we've had thus far because I'm seeing a French name. And that makes me think maybe it is. It's track 7. It's Les Morvandiaux.
You got it more or less correct. Yeah, that track, and I'll say it once so you have it. Les, that's the, Morvandiaux, and that means the people from the area of France known as Morvan. It's a area in France.
So the set goes from that into Caesars, which I do understand is based off a classical piece, also by a French composer, right?
Yes, César Franck, that's correct.
And then it goes into Sound of Slate, which is a very familiar bagpipe tune.
Right.
And this is part of why I thought maybe this would be an appropriate tune to look at, for the sake of that fusion, of the instruments and maybe of places and stuff like that. I find this set exciting because it feels like the accordion actually takes the lead in the Sound of Slate, which is not what I would have expected. I would have expected the bagpipe to lead out and the accordion to just kind of accompany. You know what I mean?
Oh, really? I'm just curious. Why would you assume that?
I guess because, at least in my mind, like, Sound of Slate is one that I've been playing since, like, I might have learned that the first year I started playing bagpipes when I was a teenager. It feels like very much this is a bagpipe tune. And so I guess there's just like an unconscious association with that, meaning that therefore it belongs to the bagpipe will play it, and the accordion's going to play some chords behind it. Like, it wouldn't have even necessarily occurred to me that another instrument could play the melody line and bagpipe could play harmony.
Interesting. I mean, you have to remember that in Scotland, I was just in Scotland this summer actually, and again, the accordion and the bagpipes, they're a pair, and the accordions pretty much play all the tunes that the bagpipes play. And it's so the fact that what Tim does is he's not so much accompany the melody of Sound of Slate. If you listen carefully, you realize he keeps playing the middle tune, which is César. He calls César, which is the César Franck.
Oh, is that what he's doing?
He just keeps going, and then I switch to Sound of Slate. So it may seem to you that he's suddenly playing an accompaniment role, but that's not the way we envisioned it at all.
That makes it blends so beautifully.
It does.
It makes a lot of sense.
They go together, but the idea is that he's playing his melody, and I've introduced Sound of Slate. Then when he joins Sound of Slate, you hear it as, there's the Sound of Slate.
It's really there, yeah.
It's just that Tim is playing the other tune. And, it depends how you mix things.
Yeah.
You can mix a recording of the bagpipes in such a way that you hear other instruments more loudly, or you can mix the bagpipes to such a degree that what you hear is the bagpipes. It depends.
Yeah. The do you feel like this idea of like, the word that comes to mind is confluence, sort of like the running together of different cultures, like you talked about happening in Paris, the bringing together of different instruments that use different systems like chromatic and diatonic, the different musical genres coming together. I'm thinking, I guess in my head right now, what I have going a lot is a lot more of the Clayfoot Strutters, which is very much like there's a whole lot of cool fusion stuff going on there. Do you feel like that's something that has always interested you and that kind of informs the projects that you're most interested in? Or are you also like a core, like, give me the folk, give me that old time religion style music, like the way it's always been done? Or I don't know. I guess I'm trying to get inside your head a little bit about when it comes to musical projects, what gets you interested and what do you chase?
Well, let's see. There's only one I can't quite answer, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with my tongue. And I'm going to go back to your question. Your question is, am I drawn to things that are fusion more than things that are, and what was the word you said, like how they... I think here's the problem. I know what it is, James. I'm having a problem with this. There's an assumption I think you're making that in the past there was no fusion.
Oh,
that it's a new thing.
You are very insightful. I wasn't trying to trick you anyway, but that's exactly where I wanted to go. Is the idea that we like ensconce things that we perceive as being the past as being like frozen in time, rather than thinking it's all a progression. But so carry on with exactly what you're saying. This is exactly what I was hoping you could.
Okay,
talk about.
All right. Well, because for sure. There was an era in the turn of the century, we were just talking about it, the last turn of the last century. Mm-hmm. I think there was all this fusion happening in Paris. There were accordions and bagpipes playing together. Oh my gosh. And they were playing jazz, and they were playing French music, and they were playing Italian music, and tango, and foxtrot, and everything. Yeah. So fusion's always been there, and am I always drawn to it? Well, I'm just drawn to music in general.
Yes, yeah.
In other words, I guess the answer is yes, I am drawn to music.
Yeah.
But I think to make a separation for people to assume that it was once this way and it's now this way, music has just always been changing. Mm-hmm. Now, but I feel like I haven't addressed something that you are asking is, for example, there is a way when I hear certain sounds, there are things that are not pleasing to my ears. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get too specific about what, because that's not really important.
Name the artist, Jeremiah. I want to know.
No. I was going to say, I very much not want to do that.
Yeah.
But the point isn't what I don't like, because, who cares? The point is that not everything works for me. Yeah. And, well, that's how it is. Like, I experiment. Today I'm trying to write a piece of music, and I'm not liking what I'm writing. Mm-hmm. Just keep working at it. So I think, I'll get a little more specific with your question. I grew up as a child playing boogie-woogie piano. For some reason, I got, really into it. Now, I love listening to recordings from an era when boogie-woogie piano players were just, there was no they were just doing it.
Yeah.
In a way, maybe boogie-woogie is a fusion of different things. But every piece of music that I've ever listened to is a fusion. There's just there's nothing. It's like elements in the ground. If you dig a hole in the ground, you get all these different rocks. There's just all kinds of stuff in the ground. Music is So I don't even really separate it out. There is music I don't like, and I tend to gravitate toward music that I like. That's just personal. And
Certainly.
I know this maybe sounds a little too severe to say, but it's like I don't see the point in classifying music any more than we classify food. I like that, but I don't like that.
They are the two. It's interesting that you say that, though, because these are the two things, at least to my consciousness, where we often hear that word fusion being used.
In cuisine?
Yep, in cuisine and in music.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about food is that it used to be it was about what tasted good. It is now, unfortunately, I think, become what it represents, the politics of food. But I'm not... I like to play music and listen to music that does things for me. It doesn't have to always sound traditional. It doesn't have to sound like it's been done. And a lot of times, some of the music that I like the best, I didn't like it at first.
Oh, sure.
I will say that. I don't think there's any reason... I mean, there is a danger in writing music that is too intellectual for me. There's such a thing. Or too dissonant or too abstract. I mean, there is music that but I don't... I think with Tim and I, that recording... We weren't trying, we didn't have ideas as much as we had sounds in our ears, and we trusted each other to try to make sounds that we liked.
I think that makes sense. So rather than setting out with a goal, something like, let's make a set that has a French folk song, a French highbrow song, and a Scottish song, it was more like, this sounds nice, and it pairs nicely with this, and that pairs nicely with this, and so it comes about maybe in a more organic way. Does that sound maybe close to accurate?
Well, it's a little... The thing is... Say what you just said again.
Maybe the contrast on the left hand, I could say, I want to put together a set that contains tunes that fit neatly into these three categories. So I'm fusing together, right, to use that word fusion, a French folk song, a French classical song, and a Scottish song, because I think it'd be cool to fuse those together. Versus on the right-hand side, I could say, here's this tune that I like, and here's another tune that I like, and they go together nicely. And then, this other tune sounds really pretty with them as well, so let's play that because it sounds nice.
Yes, it's the latter.
The latter,
not
and
the latter is more. It's more about the. I mean, sometimes it's just serendipity.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of it is very much like we're playing. We have you're always throwing things at the wall. You find out what sticks. But there's endless experimentation. So
yeah.
And then the number of so it would be very unlike us to say, well, let's put a hip hop number next to this Scottish ballad and see what we can do. But the 5/4 set that you mentioned, I just want to say to go back into time.
Yeah.
Tim was thinking about writing a piece of music based on the Scottish pibroch, and I believe he borrowed an I think it's called The Old Woman, but his Port William is based on something that he knew.
He always has these fun trails and puzzles behind the titles that he chooses for his tunes. So if you dig enough, you can find things behind them.
Yeah. But the tune that I wrote that follows it, that was in direct relationship to his melody.
That's Apple Knoll?
Yes, yeah. Apple Knoll came about as an exercise. We had his piece and we both really liked it. It was in 5, which is a gorgeous tempo. A gorgeous key signature, time signature. I can't talk now. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, let me write something. And it was specifically written in response to his tune.
I see. So
whereas it might have been, it could have easily have been that I had it in my my notebook. I could have had it simply sitting around and said, oh, well, how about this tune? Let's try this. but instead that came about, and so that's very different when that happens.
I wonder if there's something, not to get too far, not to push you too far out there, but maybe there is some sort of like almost even, musically spiritual element here that, like, I don't know, that I love this whole album, the Wind Among the Reeds. I love all the tracks, but that one in particular, not only did it strike me in a strong way the first time I heard it, I've listened to it surely hundreds of times over the last 5 or 6 years, and it's never like not special to me, like it's. Like I shared it with some of my siblings, and just like, honestly, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable with too much praise here either or anything, but like it is a special thing for me. And like sometimes I feel very stressed with work or feel like I'm failing as a father or something like that. This is kind of like a prepackaged therapy session for me. I feel like my breathing slows down, my pulse, like everything kind of calms down and slows down. This has become sort of like an exercise for me almost to listen to this tune. And so it's I wonder I like maybe getting out there sometimes, just thinking like, is it just the notes, or is there something behind how this came together that somehow translates on a level that I can't speak to?
That's I have to say, I don't think anybody gets tired of praise when it comes.
Of course,
it's right. Not just it's, and I gotta say, what you're saying is something more personal and more, just a lot more meaningful, and it's not just praise. It's like, I think it's the point of music. So, but to go after why does this set of tunes do that? I am really curious. I have some ideas, I have some feelings, like, but I don't have an answer. But I think that they're both some of our better pieces.
Yeah.
It sounds stupid, but I think Port William is just really. I think we'd have to analyze it musically, and I don't know that we can do that. Or I'm not sure that I'm prepared to totally take it apart musically, note by note. But I think that's part of it. Is that it's a really, and I think the nice thing is the transition from the one into the other. Obviously, the whistle. It changes. It changes in energy. But my piece, because it was written very specifically as a response, they're connected in some way.
Yeah.
Now, this is where the funny thing is, like, to talk too much about music, and music analysis and theoretical analysis is part of being a musician, or not all musicians, but I'm certainly prone to analysis a lot. If you're a composer, when I consider myself one, you have to know what you do well to be able to do it repeatedly.
Sure.
Now, this morning I've been struggling, in part because I don't know how to recreate some of the things that I've done in the past, including Apple Knoll. I'm just thinking, so what is it about Apple Knoll that works so well? And this morning I'm working on a piece and I'm like, nope, it's not working. Sometimes you get into a zone, and when you're in that zone, you might well be being given help by the whatever words you care to use. I mean, I think I'm trying to answer your question. If you feel something when you listen to it, there's a good chance that you're feeling the same thing that Tim or I or any other composer might feel when they're writing it. Whatever that is, I do think that art functions that way consistently. If artists, and I include musicians in this category, anybody making art of any kind, if it's got that potential for healing for other people in observing or in listening to the art, it's the same thing. But what is it? I don't know. And
Yeah,
You know,
I wouldn't want in any way to suggest that I'm taking away from the sort of like hard work or skill or talent of an artist, but it does make me think of like Ross Ainsley, who's a very popular bagpiper, who came on the show recently, mentioned that when he gets ideas for songs, often he feels like if he's got his radio turned on, then ideas come in, and it also makes me think of Tolkien, who often talked about his characters throughout the Lord of the Rings and the rest of the Legendarium as like people who he was meeting, and he doesn't know what's going to happen with them, like in letters to his son Christopher and stuff, like, oh, I just met this person Faramir, I'm still not sure what's going to become of him, but I'm excited to see what's going to happen, or was it Michelangelo who talked about his statues and saying that like it's in there, I'm just trying to uncover it.
Yeah,
this sort of like
it's the same. Yep, exactly. All of these, the common thread here is that you do have to have your receptors open, and that's a tricky thing to do, especially for people when we're under a certain amount of pressure to produce something.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I'm working on a commission right now.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges of having it be your job, right?
Now there you go. Right back to where we started, is that the problem with music is that you have to get outside and goof around for it. You have to do something to get to a place where you are open.
Yeah.
And if you're not, it's harder to create something meaningful. Because what we're doing it's not about our, and this is maybe we'll and we might be wrapping up here at some point, and I'm going to steer us towards the thing that I have an allergic reaction to, is music that is in service to a person's ego, where it's like, look what I can do. And I find, obviously there's some ego involved in everything because that's who we are. We're humans. But if your receptors are off as a composer or as an artist, but you create something, what are you going to have left? You're just going to have a monument to yourself.
Yeah.
And then other people are going to listen to it or observe it. And if it's marketed well enough, they'll buy it and they'll love it. But I think without the spiritual component, and I guess that's what we have to say, there's something that's not us in spirituality that makes art so powerful. If you take that away, what the hell's left?
Yeah. And
to me, it's like...
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I mean, I just think it's so incredible that anybody could create anything of value without that. And yet it seems to me that is, in fact, what happens. Now I'm done. That's my little tirade.
No, it absolutely makes sense. And to be sort of like to give a fair rap to sort of like the maybe two opposing things here, or maybe not necessarily always opposing. Of course, there's also something to be said for like impressive technicality. Fast fingers or something like that. And sometimes the two things are the same. There's some sort of special thing happening on this like ethereal plane, if you will, or whatever it is, right? And there's technical prowess. And sometimes there's just technical prowess, and that can still be very impressive on its own. But like I wouldn't want like, are we've used the word spiritual, like, is it tapping into something about a collective human conscience, or is it, the universe, or is it a god of some kind? Like, I don't know exactly, but there does seem to be some kind of magic here, in music and other art, of course, and I guess am I keeping you too long, Jeremiah?
No, well, I do... 11:30 is sort of I have to stop at 11:30.
Okay.
So you're not keeping me too long, but I just, in case you had some other thing you wanted to get to, or, I don't know how you, whatever. I just wanted to alert you, 11:30 is when I'm going to stop.
No, that's good to know. That's
okay.
That's what I need to know, because they're like, I do have like some things that I had thought I could ask you. Some of them are very trivial, like if the accordion community has any strong feelings about the Weird Al movie and what Weird Al has done for the accordion over the years. Maybe that feels very.
Well, I haven't seen it, but.
Has Weird Al done anything for the accordion community, positive or negative?
I think it's been positive.
Yeah.
I mean, he plays the accordion.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily mean to.
How could it not be positive?
Right, yeah. See, but I don't want to tear down like anything sort of like deeper or more interesting that we've been talking about by bringing it back around to something like that. But
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I do feel like it's so. Well, what you said about listening to Apple Knoll and Port William, it just confirms for me, and I'm very glad you said what you did, because it does feel like musicians do what they do, composers do what they do for a reason. It may be about ego and, well, it's certainly about making a living, yes.
Sure,
and the ego is part of that, so I have no problems with that. I do feel like when the muse, I'm going to call it the muse, because we could call it God or spirituality or something, but if you say the muse, it has this interesting Greek sort of mythological connection, because what are we doing? We're listening to the muse, and the muse might help write the song in much the same way that it helps Tolkien write his novels or an artist do their art. And the truth is, how you access that is different for every person and maybe changes from day to day. And this morning I was having a hard time with it. I wasn't successful, but part of the artist's work is to simply show up and be there ready. As they say, it is 99% perspiration. Now, I don't know if that's whoever said that.
That sounds like a quote, yeah.
It's definitely a lot of labor simply showing up and saying, I'm ready. What is there something there? And I think when I listen to music that I don't like, the problem is it feels like, well, if you spend the time, I think you might create something great. But if people aren't spending the time that's required, it's really... I mean, there's a lot of not great art that I've heard and listened to and watched and read, and I just think, well, what we need is music that's powerful and has the capacity to heal. Yeah, we need that. Yeah, we need that a lot.
So this is, I guess, part of the thing where, like, I feel like I want to be cautious about it because a big part of what bagpiping is for me and for a lot of my friends has to do with this competition element, right? Which is like, I've tried to figure this out before. Like, I think that maybe what it taps into in our brains is at least partially and maybe even mostly more like where sports and war exist and not as much where art exists. And so it becomes this weird thing where it's like we're turning art into a question of doing it exactly right and fighting against others who can't do it quite as right or who do it slightly more right than us. And it's like, these both seem to serve something in me, right? It seems like I need them both, but it feels, I guess I don't want to demean competition bagpiping, but what I do feel like is important is I feel like for me personally in the past, I have only sat down to play my instrument with very competitive goals in mind. Like, here is the set of music that I am learning, and I'm going to get every doubling and every grace note down precisely this way, and I'm going to do a lot of reps on this music that's in black and white in front of me. And so there's a lot of work, and that can be very rewarding. I'm not saying that that's not a good thing, right? But maybe it has its place, and there has been a profound lack of what I might call play, where I actually get out my instrument and, like you say, I show up and kind of like listen to the muse, maybe, like just kind of see what happens, and play on the instrument. And I feel like that unlocks something in a different part of my brain or in my heart, whereas the other was in my brain or something. Is that making sense? I'm kind of trying to speak to my community here, right? And be like, it's good. Keep putting in the work for your pipe major and play those tunes, right? But follow the muse too sometimes. Like, I don't know. I'm petering out of words here, but I guess this is.
I mean, you're saying that in the bagpipe community and then the culture of bagpiping, there's the potential to get lost in the weeds of the technicality Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
there is
maybe,
that potential.
Maybe specifically in the competitive Highland bagpiping
And the
community.
I think I can relate to that. I think I've seen that in accordion playing as well. But I think you're right, in bagpiping it's unfortunate. I've noticed that a lot. Yeah,
well, I feel
it's hard not to notice that, honestly, James. I think bagpiping is, it's set up in such a competitive way at times.
It has there's a military history that I think has a part to play in it, and I guess part of the is this an advocacy thing? I'm not even sure exactly what, but I can see in my own experience how something in more recent years has like blossomed and been a beautiful thing to experience. Not saying that like I'm doing it well or something like that, right? But there's been such a hyper focus on, and I'm not even saying that like one is bad and the other is good, rather that maybe they're just two different things, right? And it's been a hyper focus on, again, it feels like sports more to me and less like art in a way, but I also don't want to be demeaning to the form. It's like these clearly, I don't know, we were talking about how like fusion is always there, right? And it's not like anything ever is really completely frozen in time. But I think, especially in competitive piping, we do have this idea that there's an absolute right way to do it. And this has been established, and you do not stray from that, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's in some ways that's a vehicle to preserve things, and so it can be good in that way. You know, it can be kind of like a time machine, I guess, in a positive way. But I think that it shuts down people. You know, like I have so many friends who don't really want to play, not even just in public, but even just like in their own kitchen, because they feel like they don't have enough technical prowess, and so they just don't play the instrument. You know what I mean?
Well, that I can clearly weigh in on.
Please do, yeah. Save me from my rambling, please.
Well, I think, but what you said is that in the end, I think what is a great expression. You know, perfectionism is the enemy of the good. Now, I think I'm misquoting it, but like if somebody is afraid to play because it's not good enough. But it's such a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't play, it will never get good. But if it's not good enough for you to play, then it just seems like we have to stop and say, wait, it's not supposed to be perfect. It's not supposed to be ideal. That's not what music is for. In fact, this idea of sports and competitiveness, sports has a winner and a loser. The point of a sporting event is that you win. Mm-hmm. And so, therefore, you want to compete. And I understand that. It's human nature. But music is not that. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry if I come off sounding a little bit strident about competitiveness in music. You don't have to be as
careful as I do.
I don't have to be careful. That's right. This is something you have to worry about. I don't. I can be flaming. That's right. I think competitiveness in music simply shortcuts the spiritual part. It's very hard to compete for spirituality because, as we know, that doesn't really work.
We could look at all the worst examples of religiously driven tragedies in all of human history.
Competitiveness.
The winner-loser mentality. That's where the problems come in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Mm. I don't even know why you should have to be careful about this, because it seems to me like, anybody who says, well, I don't want to play because I don't sound good enough. But the whole point is you play in order to sound good, or that you play in order to release something, and that sounding good is a byproduct almost.
Yeah.
It's not the end. It's not the goal, really. Yeah. I mean, I like to play well. I'm a professional musician, so if I don't play well, people pay money to hear me play. Right, Why should I? It's called lack of respect. If I show up to a gig and I haven't practiced and I play poorly, Well, these people have paid money. I owe them that. That's a different contract.
Yes,
I do have to go.
Okay.
It's 1 o'clock.
I can't. I'm assuming that I can't get you to reveal to me which of you is Wheezer and which one is Squeezer, right?
Well, that's the beauty of that name. Yeah. I gotta say was that nobody could ever know because they were both.